Um, Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning for our Policy Pulse. We are going to dive into the state portion of this webinar first, just kind of covering all the things that happened in Georgia over the course of the past few months. And then we are going to dive into a more federal top line discussion with a with a discussion. Sorry, and if everyone could please just put their questions in the question and answer portion, and we will try to get to those. And then, as a reminder, we will have two open Q&As, both at the end of the state session and the federal session. So yeah, after we dive into state, we will pass it over to Tony to open it up for us, and then we will hear from Sally Kilpatrick, who's principal at Cornerstone Government Affairs, for a little bit of a deeper dive. We'll hit that Q&A, and then we will move into a federal panel discussion, and we have with us Lizzie Fox, who is the Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs for BIO, Bobby Patrick, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for AdvaMed, and Nick Lazowski, Senior Director of Federal Advocacy for Pharma. And that conversation will be moderated by Maria. And then again, we will have that next Q&A. So now that everyone knows the agenda, I am going to pass it over to Tony to open it up for us. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everyone. Live from Hartsfield Jackson this morning, just because the work does not stop. But I'm sure, like me, most of us are happy to be out of the legislative session. I want to start off by thanking everyone for their commitment to the life sciences across this year. And more importantly, thank you to the Policy and Advocacy Committee for your efforts in what was a fun and certainly a fast-paced session. I know Sally plans to give a few updates on the lay of the land, but wanted to quickly highlight just the cohesive work that our team did on HB 139, Georgia's 340B manufacturer mandate legislation. We met, we had dinners, we fought, had text chains, and did a ton of education with our lawmakers to help them understand the disadvantages of the legislation to our communities and our patients. And with our hard work and a lot of backroom conversations, the bill fortunately did not have the momentum to pass and failed this session. So that is a huge kudos to everyone for the hard work there. Now, this is certainly an issue that we expect to pop up again next year, and we will certainly be ready for it when it does happen. But for now, I wanted to say congratulations to everyone on a hard-fought year. And with that, I will pass it over to Sally.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sally Kilpatrick with Cornerstone Government Affairs. We work kind of side by side with Georgia Bio and your members at the Georgia State Capitol every session, and just want to say we really appreciate our partnership. This session was, as just described, very fast. As everyone knows, Governor Kemp is term limited, and he will be moving on in 2 years. And so the governor's race is already starting to heat up, even starting during session. You could kind of see through the bills they were passing and the conversations, everyone's really setting the stage for these big statewide offices that will open up. Burt Jones, who is currently our lieutenant governor, is expected to be the front runner in the governor's race. And so that will leave open our lieutenant governor, which I know in other states, some lieutenant governors are more figureheads. In Georgia, they do actually run the Senate and they're very powerful. So not only will we have a new governor, we'll have a new lieutenant governor. Our Attorney General, Chris Carr, has already announced for governor as well. So we will also have a new Attorney General race. So all that to say is our session was very much focused on setting the stage for a lot of political ambitions. But the two most important issues that dominated the session this year was obviously our budget, which we pass a balanced budget in Georgia every year, and then tort reform. The budget, which was House Bill 68, which was our fiscal year 2026 budget, which we call the big budget, passed with revenue estimate of $37.8 billion. That is up $1.6 billion from our budget last year. And this year, the governor and the House and the Senate really focused on public safety and education as the main priorities. And unfortunately for Georgia Bio, a number of programs in various agencies had to take haircuts. And while we didn't lose all of our funding, we did lose about 20% of our funding for our rural teacher training program. So really it just puts us back to where the program started. Maria and Mel and I have already talked, obviously this will be a priority next year, getting that increase back up to where it was. And we are hoping to work over the interim in the off season to have those discussions and get that funding back. I will highlight in healthcare that the majority of funding went to the Department of Community Health. They administer our Medicaid program, and Medicaid reimbursements got the majority of that funding at $16.9 million. And another big focus here in Georgia on the healthcare front has been maternal mortality and maternal health. And so the next big budget item that went over to DCH was $8.8 million to start focusing on that. I believe Georgia is one of the worst states in the country on that front. But we will pass along highlights after the call of the budget, and we're happy to take questions, on a deeper dive if needed there. But I will say it was a very heated budget conversation between the House and Senate this year, probably more so than previous sessions. And so that was very interesting to watch. And then tort reform. Georgia has been on the list for terrible civil litigation for a very long time. And the business community, with the leadership of the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker, but especially Brian Kemp, had he not made this a priority, this would have not happened. And I know for each of you, this probably means, different things, but overall, this was a huge, huge win for the business community. And some of the highlights, Senator Pro Tem Kennedy carried the bill in the Senate, and it passed in the House. But the highlights for tort reform are primarily they limited anchoring, jury bifurcation, which was a big deal and has been something that the business community has been trying to pass for years. They set special damages limits. Attorney fees were addressed, as well as negligent security. And so that's a very high level. We are happy to send out a memo that takes a deeper dive, or if any of your general counsels would like a memo on what exactly was in the tort reform bill, we can provide those details. But that really took up a lot of oxygen and time to get that through. It was no easy feat. I think it passed by one vote in the House, to show you how close that was. Now, a couple of bills that I think that the group, did want to see pass. I know that data privacy was Senator John Alvar's bill. I believe a number of you had worked in to get your language tweaked and were okay with the bill. Unfortunately, as some things happened, politics played a part in that, and that bill ultimately died in the House. We did see a number of study committees pass on sine die. I'll be interested, we all will be interested to see what actually makes it into a study committee. The Senate had far less than the House. And so once those study committees are assigned, which usually happens around May or June after the governor has been done signing his bills, we'll get that list out to you, and please flag anything that you would like us to follow closely. But again, very political year. A lot of social issues were kind of the hot topics, again, setting the stage for these upcoming elections. We do anticipate Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones announcing in May. We also have, John Ossoff is up for re-election. So depending on if the governor announces he's going to run for that or not, we'll see another slew of candidates go after that seat. So just a lot of politics and political play here in Georgia in the next year and a half. So, and if I missed anything, happy to circle back. But Mel, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sally. That was really helpful. Yeah, it's going to be interesting when all of our TV screens are filled with ads again. Did not miss that. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm not seeing any in the Q&A portion. But if anyone does have any questions, you can either put them in there or maybe raise your hand or put it in the chat.
I'll happily take the time for federal because I know that's a burning issue right now. I will say from a state perspective, we are stepping back and be working with Sally, Tony, and our policy and advocacy committee very much in the off season, as we call it. Sally, just from a process standpoint for our audience, can you clarify how things work? Because we have such a short session, any fiscal requests, we will be working to cultivate those and develop those so they can be in the hands of any champions for that in August, September, correct?
Right. So agencies start submitting their budget requests in July to the governor, definitely by August. And so any priorities that we would want to try to have an agency own for us, such as, rural teacher training initiative, it'd be ideal for that request to come from DOE. And so we would start those conversations with Juan Carlos and others, in addition to any other, budget asks. But yes, the budget process starts well in advance of session. And then that's just the governor. But then the House and Senate, we have more leeway to work with them during session because they'll have their own asks. But still building up our approach champions should start well into late summer, early fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really shouldn't be called the off season.
It's not like that anymore.
Okay.
It looks like we have one question, Mel. Can you all explain more about what the implications of tort reform are for consumers?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that it just how we see it, and obviously a lot of us have clients on the business side of it. I do think it just kind of levels the playing field. We live in a society where it's very easy to sue, and just given how our laws are reflected and they're, tilted towards plaintiffs' lawyers, this just gives anyone a little bit more, a fair, equal, balanced shot at representing your side and not just having to pay out once you're sued. I'm not going to be able to dive deep on the tort reform, but we can get you a better answer than the one I just gave, I'm sure.
Yes, and I'll also just add, I don't know that it'll have many impacts on just the consumer level, but at least for sort of our area with healthcare, I know it gets sort of phantom costs, phantom damages. So that is just like when you go to sue, you can't use numbers that didn't actually make it to your bills. So that's one piece of it. But as far as being a consumer, I don't know that there's much change there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to close out as we pivot to federal. For consumers, there's going to be mixed feedback on this. There are critics that feel that they can limit patients or consumers' ability to seek fair compensation if they're harmed by medical negligence. But we're going to see how this plays out a little bit. Let's see, and then in some cases, caps on damages may be difficult for consumers to find legal representation. So again, that's what the critics side, but supporters were driven by the frivolous lawsuit and lowering the liability of insurance costs for providers and things like that. So there's definitely two sides to this, but that's probably the more overarching response to your question. From Eric, and then we're going to pivot to federal. Is there anyone that we need to target for any health-oriented committees, representative, Senate, local, national, running for office in November to connect with, to develop better relationships. For us as an organization on the behalf of the industry, we certainly prioritize of the chair of the health committee and various members there, but there are different types of people and different representatives based on what the issue is. So I think there's not really a specific way we can answer that at this point because it depends on what the issue is.
Mhm. I would say we can connect offline.
Yeah,
on
we
that
can
one.
connect a bit more offline on that, Eric, because there's going to be different people for different issues that we're targeting. And then over the summer, internally, we'll be working with a small committee and the board to identify where we do want to prioritize some of those asks come August, September on behalf of the industry, outside of our biotech teacher training program, but more industry ecosystem focused asks. And that would help boost the ecosystem and the understanding and recognition of the life science industry here. Great, thank you.
Yeah. And I think with that, we will wrap up state. We are moving along right on time. And I am going to pass things over to Maria, who is going to be moderating that federal discussion for the group. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Sally and the team. State was it was an interesting session and pretty chaotic, pretty divisive too. So especially that last week, where we had a lot of unexpected and last minute changes. But we powered through, built some relationships, and as we look ahead over the next 2 years, as was touched on, we do have a gubernatorial election coming up, and we anticipate that to create continued some interesting dynamics starting in the fall and winter, I'm sure. Well, thank you, Sally and team. So as we pivot, Mel did mention who our speakers are, but I'm going to be inviting them to touch on themselves and the role in their organizations. But I do want to preface this discussion by saying we are navigating very unprecedented times. I think as long as you're not living under a rock, things are moving very quickly and can change very quickly. Last night, we had another executive order hit that impacts the pharma industry directly. So we're going to do our best to touch on that. We have a lot of questions we're going to try and cover to try and encompass the interesting, let's say, environment we're working and living in at the moment. So with that, I'm going to ask Bobby to kick us off because you're top left of my screen, and just introduce yourself and your role in AdvaMed for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks for having me today. Looking forward to the conversation. So I'm Bobby Patrick. I'm Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at AdvaMed, the MedTech Association. And in that role, I lead both our alliance partnerships work as well as our state affairs work. And those things are sort of crossing throughout the organization these days, especially on the alliance partnership side. So again, looking forward to the conversation and appreciate being here.
Thank you. Lizzie?
Hi, Lizzie Fox, Senior Director at Biotechnology Innovation Organization. So we're the Federal Trade Association. We work closely with Georgia Bio on various federal issues. So I previously started Bio about 3 years ago, and I worked on appropriations and tax, but in my current role starting in January, I now work with Senate Democrats.
Great, thank you. And Nick?
Hi, thank you for having me today. My name is Nick Lasowski, a Senior Director of Federal Advocacy at Pharma. Many of you probably know our association. Similar to Bio, we're a federal trade group that represents 30 plus pharmaceutical manufacturers. We're located here in DC. My specific role is lobbying House Republicans. That's where I spent my time on the Hill, mostly E&C and leadership.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. It's an important conversation. I believe we're going to be having more of these conversations over the next 3.5 years. Particularly over the next 6 months, I'm sure. But just to kick us off, and I'm going to ask whoever wants to go first on this. Given the current volatility in Washington, ranging from federal funding cuts and agency restructuring, the shifting legislative priorities during an election year, what are the biggest policy or budgetary uncertainties your organization is watching most closely? And I know there are a lot. And how are they going to impact the industry in the months ahead? In the crystal ball that we're all looking at. I know we're all laughing at this question, but Bobby, you're off mute first.
Yeah, I can take a shot at this first. I think we're going to get into this a little bit more later, but right now, the thing that we're most focused on that is causing the most uncertainty is just the tariff situation. And it's not even, confined to, what specific products or what markets are impacted. It's whether they're going to take effect and at what rates and when, if they do take effect, right? So I think the moving around on that has been a significant challenge throughout this process. And it's something that, you know, obviously is taking up a lot of our time internally. And then, sort of then looking beyond that is to the reorganization at HHS, right? And the significant layoffs that are happening there. The potential reorganization at the FDA is certainly going to have an impact on everybody's organization and all the companies that we represent here as well. So, I mean, I think those two things are front of mind right now.
Lizzie or Nick, anything to add? Lizzie?
Yeah, very similar. The tariffs, because it's unprecedented for pharmaceuticals. At Bio, we also have a lot of ag and like sustainable aviation fuels. So we're not just biopharma. So we have the whole gamut there. Unfortunately, ag has seen the kind of tariff fight before, but again, still, our industry relies on certainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Also, the regulatory uncertainty, whether it's restructuring. There was an executive order that came out last night, so tracking that, and then legislation. So the biggest thing on the Hill right now is reconciliation. So what kind of bill are they going to have? What are the taxes? And then especially how our industry will be paid for. We saw that in 2017 with the R&D amortization, and specifically with the orphan drug tax credit being halved as a pay for, not for any policy reason, just they needed to hit a number. And our industry tends to be the one to pay for these big bills.
Lizzie, as Nick comes off mute, could you actually just touch on, or maybe Nick can do it for you? What is reconciliation for those that may not understand what that is? Thank you.
Great. Lizzie, do you want to take it? The reconciliation process is a sort of a budgetary and legislative way that Congress can move policies, specifically through the House and then the Senate, without having to hit the 60 vote threshold. Policies that are included in the reconciliation process have to have a budgetary impact, which is the main point of the policy. It's how Trump is using his majority in the House and the Senate to move forward priorities that he campaigned on, mainly tax cuts, immigration changes. But in order to do energy reform, in order to do a lot of that, they have to find, as Lizzie sort of touched on, a lot of pay-fors or offsets in order to pay for many of the spending items that they'll do related to the border, related to energy, et cetera. And healthcare is certainly a main focus of where those offsets and pay-fors are coming from, specifically Medicaid. Georgia, I know, has a very specific sort of policy approach to Medicaid, as do many states in the South. And I think a lot of the changes will be, or a lot of the pay-fors and offsets will be focused in that sort of situation. There is, opportunity that comes in the reconciliation process as well. A lot of what Bobby and Lizzie said are areas of focus of ours as well. Tariffs. Something I'll touch on briefly is the first Trump administration did a CMMI, international reference pricing demo. We've seen some Trump adjacent groups release some literature about that as well. And this EO last night has a little bit of language that touches on international reference pricing again. But there's also some positives in that executive order related to fixing Biden's pill penalty, the 9 to 13 issue that many of you are, I'm sure, familiar with. If not, I can touch on that briefly. He discusses middlemen and the need to reform PBMs and middlemen. A lot of these policies were in the December CR that ultimately failed. And I think that's an area of focus of ours, is getting a lot of what was in that December CR done this year. And we're, exploring all potential opportunities to do so. I see a...
Yeah, there's a question on this. Can you repeat the acronym, Nick, you just mentioned for the international pricing?
So I said MFN, most favored nation, or international reference pricing. There's different ways a policy like this can be structured, but the idea is that you would use European countries with similar, I don't want to say similar markets, but I think, first world countries, if you will, that have a high degree of spending in the healthcare sector, and take averages or the lowest of what those countries pay for specific drugs, and then import that in the United States and set in Medicare that price for those specific products. So an even
Great.
more stringent price control mechanism than what the IRA currently does.
Yes, and I just the tariff issue is going to be ongoing for a while, especially with uncertainty. When it comes to Georgia, it's a challenge for us in particular, considering how big of a supply chain hub we are. And that impacts a variety of industries. Additionally, there are concerns in our agriculture area about even more challenges due to reciprocal tariffs. So we're working and very engaged with the Georgia Chamber, who's doing a lot of leadership in that area. So if you in particular do manufacturing in the space, please reach out to us and try to engage more if you don't already. We are working on standing up a small manufacturing council to bring that community together. We especially know that the tariffs hitting is going to impact that side of things. And we do also know many of our companies maybe bought supplies 6+ months out, but now with the uncertainty, that is creating more challenges because 6 months of an advance purchase may not have been quite as helpful. We have a lot of questions, a lot of issues to cover, so I'm going to pivot a bit to NIH here. So again, to all whoever wants to take it first, in light of the recent NIH budget reductions, significant restructuring and staffing changes at the FDA, and the upcoming reauthorization of SBI or STTR programs, how do these federal policy shifts collectively influence the trajectory of biotech innovation, particularly for small and emerging companies? And then I'm going to go with you, Lizzie, on this one first. And what strategies are we as associations employing to navigate these changes and advocate for policies?
Yeah, so we also have a lot of new members on the Hill right now in both the House and Senate. So we're doing a lot of education. There's a lot of staff and members themselves who don't know what biotechnology means. So we started the first few months just having those basic conversations and education. And again, reinforcing how consistency and how we work with the federal government. So that's been really helpful. And staff have always asked for explanations like, if this, ACIP, we talk about the flu vaccine, for example, if they didn't have that meeting, what would that mean down the line for having a flu vaccine in the fall? So again, sharing that pipeline and how our industry works with the federal government, or maybe it's the biodefense side, where the federal government is the only purchaser. Like, I don't want to buy smallpox or anthrax medication at CVS. That means things are really bad. So kind of how, again, those pipelines work and why our companies rely on that consistency from the federal government and a strong federal government, that, there can always be some tweaks and changes to make FDA and HHS stronger, but you need a consistent workforce. You need a talented workforce who kind of knows what they're doing, again, on both the biopharma and the ag side, where if we want to be able to be competitive and have our products come to the market, then you need to have a consistent federal government to be approving them.
Great. Any ads from anybody else?
I'll just add from farmers' perspective, I think a lot of the changes and cuts that were made at NIH and really FDA have certainly been an area of concern and focus of ours. A lot of folks that are science and regulatory department work with at the FDA regarding the next user fee cycle. We're part of those cuts, and that has had significant impacts in our negotiation conversation process, both with bio and with FDA. It's also unclear, frankly, where the current HHS secretary sees the future of PDUFA, PSUFA, all the UFAs, if you will, and how he sees our industry's involvement in that process playing out. So that's definitely creating a challenge. And as Lizzie mentioned, a lot of our strategy is certainly focused on educating and talking to members in Congress, making sure they understand how this process actually works, what the benefits are, how drugs come to market. I think there's a sincere lack of knowledge on this issue in Congress, and a lot of folks don't really understand how complex it actually is to bring a drug to market. So making sure folks really understand that issue, understand how it works, and understand the importance of sort of a gold standard FDA is an important place to start for us.
Just for those who don't know what it is, PDUFA.
Prescription drug user fee. It's an agreement that industry makes with FDA and Congress ratifies, that basically decides how much money drug companies, pharmaceutical products, and AdvaMed medical devices, although I don't want to speak as much for you guys, Bobby, how much we'll pay and contribute to the FDA in order to get drugs approved. The FDA does get congressional appropriations, but it's quite minor compared to the money that manufacturers spend. It's sort of we're paying FDA to make sure that they have the resources they need to review clinical trials, review data in order to get drugs to market that are safe and effective.
Any ads from you, Bobby? NIH, SBIR, reauthorization?
No, I'll just echo what was already said. So, and nice nice descriptors there on what the user fees are for. So well done, Nick.
Yes, yes. Made it a lot more simple than I think we normally do. And I think I just want to stress that for those that don't typically have these types of conversations and work on the Hill or work even at the state capitol, a lot of what we do is education. We work in a very complex industry. I often use here in Georgia, movie incentives are very straightforward. People know what a movie is. It's very hard to explain the complexities of our industry. So a significant amount of our time, and I don't think Lizzie, Bobby, or Nick would disagree with me, is explaining at very basic levels what an issue is. So I was on the Hill 2 weeks ago. A lot of the conversation was on SBIR reauthorization and explaining why that's valuable economically for patients, et cetera. And it is very critical that we do that. And we invite and ask our member companies to volunteer to help come with us because they hear from all of us all the time. It is much more meaningful to hear from our companies. So just one quick call to action. But Bobby, I'm going to stay with you here. So one of the consistent challenges and opportunities in our sector is ensuring that innovative medical technologies, including those designated as breakthrough, actually reach patients who need them. So from yours and AdvaMed's vantage point, what are the most critical policy levers or legislative efforts needed to improve patient access to innovation? And how is AdvaMed advocating for these?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, as you indicated, this is an issue that we work on almost an annual basis, or has been annual for a number of years now. And really our primary vehicle for, increasing access to this is through driving broader earlier Medicare coverage of the innovative technologies. And this has sort of come through in a number of forms. It was done through regulation in the FDA at the very end of Trump 1 called MCIT, the Medicare coverage of innovative technology. That was repealed very quickly by the Biden administration. So we pivoted to a legislative strategy, which strangely enough culminated in a separate regulatory effort by CMS, which was called the Transitional Coverage of Emerging Technology, which was sort of a smaller scale version of MCIT, which really the biggest hang up there is that it only allowed 5 technologies per year to go through it, which CMS cited their resource constraints as a reason for limiting to that. So, our primary objective has been to take that and then expand upon it through both a regulatory and legislative approach in the coming years. So, sort of looking to again expand the number of technologies, ensure diagnostics are covered by it, and really it's a way to get those technologies to patients more quickly, develop that track record of success, and expand the access then beyond Medicare through into private insurers in that. So, this is an effort that we're continuing to work on now. Discussions are happening on the Hill around reintroducing this legislation this year. And I know conversations from my regulatory colleagues are in progress with CMS as well, especially now with Dr. Oz in place. Someone who has significant experience and familiarity with the benefits of innovative medical technology. We're optimistic that we'll be able to gain stronger momentum with the new administration in the coming years.
Right. Thanks. Lizzie, Bio's been very active in elevating the importance of U.S. leadership in biotech, particularly with the increasing competition from China. What are the recent recommendations from the National Security Commission on emerging biotech? We saw that report and everything come out last week. What role do you see Congress and federal agencies playing in strengthening our domestic bioeconomy? And how can we ensure policies protect and accelerate innovation?
We are very excited to see the commission report came out. We are very excited about America being a leader in biotechnology, but recognize that it's currently being threatened. So we're really excited to see the report acknowledge that there's a big sense of urgency that we need to act now, and it needs to be bold. There's currently a number of recommendations in there, so we're really excited to continue working with the commission. A lot of the commissioners are Senate and House members as well. There's about 4 of them, and just kind of see what are the next steps. I know the commission doesn't want to just put out the report and then say, okay, we're done. They're still very active on what are they going to do next. So we look forward to working with them as well, the administration, to make sure that there are, private sector investments and working with academia and the federal government to make sure that we remain a global leader.
Great, thanks. Nick, Pharma's 2025 policy platform lays out a vision for achieving a healthier America through innovation and improved access. With ongoing debates around drug pricing, R&D investment, and Medicare reforms, how do you see the federal policy environment shaping the future of biopharma innovation and patient access in the short term?
Well, it's certainly a focus, as evidenced by the executive order last night at the federal level. I think we've seen a lot, especially over the last 2 years, in both the House and the Senate. Maybe not so much the White House post-IRA, but the House and the Senate have focused a lot on reforms regarding transparency, reforms regarding middlemen. I think insurers are increasingly under the spotlight, as are other, people in the middle, wholesalers, GPOs, etc. There's a lot of folks that are constantly on the Hill talking about access and innovation issues, from the pharmacists to providers, of course, to the manufacturers and everyone in between, including patients. We saw a lot of stuff in the end of year CR that I think Congress is going to be focused on moving as soon as they can, when they find the right path related to PBM reforms, like I said, transparency. But I think there's also some things that Congress is going to be taking a look as we move forward. Again, evidenced by the executive order last night, things like reforming or fixing parts of Medicare that aren't working, that are hurting innovation. We've seen a 70% reduction in innovation in small molecule medicines just since the IRA passed, which price sets small molecule medicines at 9 years relative to 13 years for large biologic medicines. That's having significant impacts on both research and development, but also capital investment to smaller companies. And that's not something that we want countries like China to pick up that gap and become the world leader in. So we're certainly having discussions with both chambers in Congress and the White House about some of the impacts of those policies and moving them forward.
Great, and just a summary on the EO last night, and I am getting this from Reuters, full disclosure. The executive order says that it's targeting Medicare price negotiation timeline. Congress must approve changes to Medicare price negotiations. The order also encourages state drug importation programs. And then the FDA is urged to streamline approvals for generics and biosimilars. So it is considered, I think, an overarching win for our industry. But as Nick noted, it is a executive order, so it's a little more complex than just signing it and it's going to happen. So,
yeah. And as I mentioned, that we do have concerns regarding things like importation. We do have concerns regarding things like international reference pricing proposals at CMMI. But as I mentioned, we are excited to see the White House throwing their support behind fixing some of the worst parts of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. That's a good start. And I think it shows you that this administration is, trying and is focused on finding ways to fix some of the worst parts of some legislation that was passed in the previous administration, at least directed towards our industry, that hampers access for patients, hampers innovation, keeps new drugs from coming to market.
Great. No, thank you. And it's a very long executive order, as Lizzie pointed out before we started this, and everyone's still reading through it, I'm sure. So this is all. I want to touch a little bit on the recent tariffs a little bit more, which are making headlines, particularly in context of U.S.-China relations. I know some of my colleagues across the Council of State Bioscience Associations have done a couple of direct op-eds about the impact on sending our innovations to China, but there's also concern about the impact on supply chain for lab equipment, for active ingredients for pharmaceuticals, for steel and whatever products needed for devices, particularly and ingredients in ag biotech inputs. So for Georgia, where ag and life sciences really intersect quite a bit, what are the potential risks or unintended consequences of the trade policies for innovation, manufacturing, and affordability? And how are y'all's orgs thinking about it?
Yeah, so at Bio, we're driven by membership. So even before the tariffs, the Section 232 investigation, so it's not an immediate tariff that's being put on right now. We do have a little time. Again, we don't know what it looks like. We don't know what it will cover. But before it came out, we did have a survey of our membership about what would be the implication of tariffs on biopharmaceuticals. So that's on our website. So if nearshoring and onshoring is great and it helps us stay competitive, but what would the timeline look like? And our survey pointed out that it would take about 8 to 10 years to be able to bring that to the United States, and that requires a lot of incentives. And again, it takes time. So the concerns with the new tariffs being announced, again, we don't know what that looks like. But what would that be on pipelines? Is it the ingredients? Our business is going to make decisions where they don't use our products, where they don't look into the next innovative thing because they're just like, we don't have the money for it right now, and who is paying the cost? And again, what are the business decisions that will be made based on that?
Anything to add for Bobby or Nick on this? I mean, I know that one of our talking points for BioFlying a couple of weeks ago is if we want new innovations for rare diseases, for continued cancer research, for everything, we need to, tariffs impact all that. It's a trickle down effect with everything. But anything to add from Bobby or Nick, or?
Go ahead, Nick.
I'll just add from our perspective, we've certainly been concerned about the sector-specific tariffs that Lizzie mentioned the Section 232 investigation might result in. And we've made the arguments to leaders in Congress and the White House that tariffs on the industry, although we're supportive and want to work with the administration to bring manufacturing back to America, 15, 20, 25% tariffs result in a locking up of capital that could be used to onshore facilities. It could lead to shortage issues, access issues, or price increases for patients that are trying to access oftentimes already expensive or hard to access medications. And we're certainly concerned about that and continue to be.
And so I'll just add, unlike my pharmaceutical colleagues here, we are subject to the tariffs that are already in place. And so, med tech is a significant amount of our finished product manufacturing already happens in the United States. And so, or in Mexico, there's a lot of manufacturing there as well. So making sure that as we're talking to administration, that we're continuing to take that into account, look at who our most significant trading partners are, what their reciprocal tariffs on medtech actually are, and if there's a way that we can sort of have a 0 for 0 policy. That's something that we've been pursuing and are continuing to talk to the administration about. We recognize what the administration is trying to do and bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, and certainly support that, and just want to make sure that it's done in a way that isn't impacting patient access or costs in a meaningful way.
Great. Lizzie, back to you, and I'm going to fire these last few questions off so we can take some audience questions. And for my small companies, we are going to touch on NIH and that the hits there for funding. But just on the shift from expensing mandatory amortization of R&D expenses over 5 years, as instituted in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, raised concerns about its potential dampening effects on innovation, particularly for startups and small biotech firms. Considering the bipartisan efforts to reverse the policy, do you see this legislative change impacting life science sector's ability to invest, and what are we doing to advocate for it? And if you could start by explaining the mandatory amortization of R&D expenses first, that would be great.
Yeah. So again, I'm not a tax person. This is my basic level understanding of it, especially for small and mid-sized biotechs. Like if you have a grant like the SBIR grant, for example, when this finally was implemented in 2022, that's when we heard the most from small and mid-sized biotechs who don't have a product on the market. As many of you know, you're the ones doing this research. And we're suddenly hit with a tax bill where usually that you could offset it and you wouldn't have a large tax bill, but suddenly had this immediate tax bill that they had to pay. And you can't use a grant to pay off the tax bill. So we heard from a lot of small to mid-sized biotechs that they had to take out loans to pay for it. Bigger companies saying, we have this unexpected tax bill that we have to pay immediately. So maybe we're just going to cut off, different pipelines and innovations there. So that's been a long time priority for bio. We've gone to the Hill a lot explaining again, how does this impact not just the big companies, but small to mid-size as well that don't have kind of the capital to be able to offset a sudden change in their tax bill, especially when, again, they're not making a profit right now. You're in the middle of research and you should be concentrating on that. So we've also had small biotechs send op-eds and sharing that with the Hill, kind of just again following your delegation of what's going on. And we were great to see that previously there was bit legislation that would have made it retroactive, so you would be able to refile and get that money back. But unfortunately, the current thinking right now is we think there's an opportunity within reconciliation, as we mentioned earlier, that there's taxes that'll be included. So there could be a fix for this where it will restore it. And so going forward, it'll be the way that you used to be able to deduct your expenses. Again, this is for when you're in the research and development, you're really in there, you're not even at clinical trials yet. But unfortunately, they won't make it retroactive due to the cost that it would add to this bill. And again, they're trying to make sure that they have a target for cost there. But at Bio, we continue to advocate saying that if it's not retroactive, what would be the impact on small to mid-sized biotechs?
And it does seem to be a bipartisan issue and for a bit of bipartisan support. So
it did. And last year, there was a package that did pass the House on a bipartisan basis, very strong one. Unfortunately, the Senate didn't take it up, but we do expect, since there is a very large coalition, Bio is part of an R&D coalition, which covers not just biopharma, but a whole bunch of industries, a very diverse coalition. So my understanding is that it's definitely something that is top of mind for members, and they want to include a fix in this new reconciliation bill.
Right. All right, quickly, Nick, 340B. Pharma has expressed concerns, a lot of concerns, on 340B program and expanded, that has expanded beyond its original intent, potentially leading to misaligned incentives that don't support patients. Additionally, the org has highlighted the role of PBMs in contributing to higher costs due to opaque rebate practices. Could you elaborate on how pharma is advocating for these reforms to enhance transparency? And in full disclosure, I know Bio is very active on 340B as well. So
yeah, very quickly, I think I would just start this off by saying the 340B program is soon to be in just a few years the largest by dollar amount government ran healthcare program, larger than Medicare, larger than the VA, larger than Medicaid. And that's concerning to us because the money's not finding its way to the patient. And what's happening is you're seeing a lot of consolidated big hospitals buy up other facilities to access 340B discounts and then use that money to either pad their own pockets or invest in areas where there aren't 340B patients, where there is not an unmet medical need, which is what the program is intended for. So pharma's really focused a lot of our advocacy on trying to drive the program back to its original use, which is directing these dollars to patients in areas where there's unmet medical need, and make sure the money is being invested to support healthy outcomes with those individuals. It's something that I think we're finding a lot of traction in with Congress. We've been working with the National Association of Community Health Centers and a large group of stakeholders that are supporting efforts to really get the program back on track.
Yep. And of course, we're having issues at the state level with this, and we're really trying to say this needs to be solved at the federal level, not done in the states. So, alrighty, Bobby, AI, let's talk AI-enabled medical techs that are rapidly transforming patient care and offering enhanced diagnostic and therapeutic capabilities. But the lack of consistent reimbursement framework poses challenges to widespread adoption. Can you discuss how the Health Tech Investment Act aims to address these challenges and what steps AdvaMed is taking to advocate for these policies to ensure patients have access?
Absolutely. So yeah, you hit right on it. The Health Tech Investment Act is our first step towards creating a consistent and understandable framework for reimbursement and payment of use of AI technologies AI-enabled medical technologies that are adding value through its use of AI to improve patient care. And, really it's, CMS has looked at these really on a case-by-case basis, which doesn't really aid in incentivizing companies to look at how to add these into AI, into technology to improve things. And so this consistent frame, establishing a consistent framework will go a long way to driving continued innovation in this space. And so, we're looking forward to having this conversation. We're grateful to, our original co-sponsors on this legislation, Senators Rounds, Heinrich, and Blackburn, and, we'll be advocating strongly for this in the coming years. And again, are hopeful that tying into the desire of the Dr. Oz and others to increase access to medical technologies to improve outcomes, especially earlier in the process. We're hopeful that this will fit within that vision.
No, that's great. Thanks. And I'll drop a link in here while y'all start chatting about the last question, which is really going to be, and I want to encourage people. I see your questions. I'm going to get to those now. Encourage people to drop any questions. And as a heads up for my panelists, there's a CDC USAID, which I know isn't big in our area, but we do know it also impacts us some. So, and being that Atlanta has CDC, it's been a dramatic impact in our own backyard. And then I do want to add one thing that came up talking to a member yesterday on if we're hearing anything about ARPA-H and what that status might look there. So I'm just going to drop that in as I kick off this question for y'all. So given the current challenges with NIH cuts, FDA, R&D tax policies, what strategies can you recommend to our members, which are mostly small and emerging companies, to help navigate the policy landscape, how to engage in advocacy efforts, help ensure innovation can continue to thrive? And I'll build into that Olivia's question in the chat about how can a student even help advocate federal funding of basic scientific research, all that. In other words, how do they engage on these types of conversations?
Kick that off. Student appropriations. So right now it's the federal funding season. So Congress is going to be looking into how do we have the next year's budget. So I know there's been a lot of changes at the federal level, but again, Congress has the power of the purse, and they can be very restrictive to general about how the federal government should be spending its money. So this is a great opportunity to be weighing in. On the Senate side, you do have Senator Ossoff, who's on the Appropriations Committee. So making sure that his staff is aware of the impact on Georgia. He's very outspoken about CDC and the impact in his state. And then on the House side, you have Sanford Bishop and Andrew Clyde, who are both members of the Appropriations Committee. But again, I strongly recommend, keeping it local. Every member of Congress has a state or district office, a multiple, where you can request meetings, you can ask to be part of roundtable discussions, strongly encourage tours. We love a field trip. Members get very excited. Everyone loves a hard hat opportunity or an ability to see what is the impact in their local, state, or district. What are you doing there? What's the exciting research you're working on? And it can make a real impact to show them, give them a facility tour, show them, explain what you're doing. And just staying in constant contact with your Georgia delegation. They do work for you. So sharing, what your thoughts and feelings are, that is your right. You can call in, you can write in, ask for a meeting, not just in DC, but again, in those local affiliate offices too. And then finding coalitions, like for bio, for example, we work with that R&D coalition on it. And then sharing with them the impact, the pipeline, jobs in the state, as well as the current, really cool research that you're working on. So now again, if USAID or other CDC funding that is really important to you, now is really a crucial time to be weighing in with your delegation.
Yes, and I'm going to drop in a link on how to find your representative, at least on the federal side. In the House, we have been doing Georgia Life Sciences significant amount of support for our small companies, helping them understand how to identify who the representatives are, providing talking points, and just doubling down on it feels to some people like it's not enough to call. But I think my colleagues here will be able to test. A lot of these offices tabulate, count, and report out how many emails, how many phone calls they get. It does matter, but it is very crucial that you focus your conversation and what your input's going to be around a particular thing. Doesn't mean you can't call about another thing the next day, but it's very important that if you want to plug in and support, you do this and you do it consistently. Anything to add, Nick, since you're off mute?
I was just going to say, I think Lizzie said that perfectly, in that traditional advocacy works. A lot of folks think that calling their members or flying up to DC and requesting meetings in the district, if you're unable to come up here, are going to get washed away with the wind. That's not the case. The more members hear from folks in district, from companies they represent, it does matter. It does make an impact. And I would not get discouraged at all. I think to Olivia's specific question, I would recommend you work with your university to see if there's advocacy opportunities. Most universities have a federal representative or lobbyist or somebody they consult with. Maybe you could work with them to find a way to do some meetings or conduct some advocacy and explain your research and how it impacts that the White House is making or Congress are making, how that's impacting your ability to do your work. But I would encourage you guys to keep, the traditional advocacy going.
And I will say that we do know that we're in regular discussions with Emory's federal team. We know they're very active. We also know at a public university perspective from the university system, they don't take stances on political issues. So that's a little bit different of an environment here in Georgia. But there have been grassroots faculty leading efforts to help educate our state policymakers and other leaders in the state at the local level on what this means economically to the state in particular and from a workforce standpoint. So you have to think about your audience as to how you communicate. And we have also been doing things behind the scenes to help support those people at various universities with what they would like to do, just with some expert guidance on how to craft their language. As we close out, I think to Edwin's question, funding cuts at CDC, USAID impacted donations of product globally. We anticipate that. And we have organizations like the Task Force for Global Health here that receive a lot of donations from pharma and medical devices. But to answer that, it's just what everybody said on the panel. It's continuing to raise your voice, even if it feels like it's going into a vacuum sometimes. It's not, we promise. Reach out to them, be consistent about it. There are a lot of tools online to help you understand how to craft your message, and we're here as a resource as well. I'm glad it was helpful. I did drop into the chat the AdvaMed Health Tech Investment Act and the links on how to find your U.S. representative, as well as the ones here at the Georgia General Assembly. Just because session is now ended as of 2 weeks ago, they are still working. Committees still meet, and during our quieter off season, we do a lot of activity and one-on-one meetings. So it is crucial. If you have a company or you're an innovator and you want to plug in more, please reach out to us. That is an actual call to action. I'm the least hidden person online. You know how to find me, and we can plug you in. There are a lot of great resources at Pharma, AdvaMed, and BIO's websites. We try to link to them from our BioBeat every Friday. So if you don't get our BioBeat email on Friday, please make sure you sign up. You don't have to be a member to get that. Though we do want you to be a member. That said, just last thing, I know we're after time. Anything on ARPA-H we should know, be aware of? Anybody got anything on that? I feel like it's been quiet. Okay. Somebody asked me, I couldn't find anything. So we'll consider it's business as usual there. We do have some companies here that have significant funding from them. That's why we ask, and university partnerships. So thank you all for joining us at today's post-session briefing and to touch base on the federal session, federal relations, excuse me. Please continue to plug in with us. We're happy to connect you with our national partners on this call, of course, but we work very closely with them on a basically weekly basis. And we hope to see you at our June event that is coming up. There are a number of events on our website. We encourage you to check that out. I know Portal has some upcoming events. Morehouse does as well. And Biotech and Brews, we're going to be in Athens for a happy hour next week. So if you're in Athens and you want to meet up, shoot me a note. A couple of our team members will be out there. We'll also be in DC in a couple of weeks. And then we have, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the date, June 5th, our Discoveries in Focus. It's going to be an academic showcase. We'll be down at Portal Innovations. Thank you for the partnership with them. We are still accepting applications a little bit longer for innovators that want to present. We'll have panels and a great opportunity to learn about how to take your academic innovation and bring it into the business world. So with that, thank you again. Apologies for going 2 minutes over. Thank you, Bobby, Nick, and Lizzie. And we look forward to continuing to help educate our policymakers and help drive innovations, therapies, and cures and devices to our patients. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.